Okay, let's try a bit with the stick. Have you got the stick there? Sorry. We don't need it. Pretend your arms are the stick, or if you've got a stick, then use it. We just want to feel the difference between the waist and the hips. So turning the waist, turning the hips. So in Tai Chi, when we turn the whole body, then we're turning from the hips generally. But when we're using the waist to generate movements, we tend to be turning from the waist, almost against the hips. Hold the stick or just bring your arms out. And then just start turning. Obviously now we can't turn the hips because we're sitting down and they're immobilized. I turn, but I don't want to turn from the arms or from the stick, from the shoulders. I want to try and get the turning to be happening because there's something happening here muscularly in my belly and my lower back. And just feel that. So in Tai Chi, your mind is never with the part of the body that's moving. It's always in the motor that's generating the movement. So here my mind is in my Dantian area, Ming Men, lower back. Place the hands on the Dantian. What I want to do is twist the Dantian side to side, really pushing the buttocks against each other. So it's like my two sides of my two hip bones are trying to do this on the chair. So in a sense, now I am moving my hips a little. Just get that action very physical. What we want to do is stop what we're doing being controlled by our conscious mind, because that will tend to rationalize everything and it will tend to reduce spirit. So the process of rationalization eradicates spirit. This is what the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, all of that, it was all about that. Spirit had become the enemy. So now just having the hands out, a very simple action of just making fists and opening them. A mechanical action, very clear, almost a piston action. I close and then I open. I close and then I open. So what will start to take it out of the realm of the machine, of the mechanical, of the rational, is feeling the inevitability of the return. So when I open the hands, I really stretch them open. And that stimulates the muscles and the tendons that are being stretched to pull back. So in order to get the pull back, I stretch it as open as I can, and then it naturally pulls back. And then here I can press as hard as I can so that it will naturally spring back out. And so I'm just taking it a little further. I'm taking it into beyond my boundary, if you like, beyond my known. Slowly, it starts to possess the whole body. Your spine starts heaving with this action. Your belly is pulling in as the hands pull together. The belly is pushing out as the hands push out. The head is moving. And it just becomes this impassioned very organic motor that you can completely lose yourself within, become possessed by. So the eyes will get involved as well. So as the hands close into fists, the eyes will close strongly and then they'll open strongly as the hands open. So we want everything, every part of our body doing this one thing. So those are the two phases, the two elements of the breath. So the opening and then the closing. You can think of the opening as being like your consciousness. So my eyes are opening and I'm seeing the world, something in me is coming out. And then you can think of the closing as being your unconscious. So something comes out of my back, but I can't see it. I was reading Father Teilhard de Chardin. He had said something really beautiful, talking about love. And he said, love the invisible and love the not yet. So it's obviously not something that you do with your consciousness because you're not conscious of the invisible and you're not conscious of the not yet. So there's another aspect of you that engages in that quality of love. And it's just the unconscious. When the Muslims pray, they go down, they expose their back, they have become invisible, they have withdrawn their consciousness inside. Or the Tibetans, when they prostrate themselves, they become all back. So let's just try this exercise of just lifting the hands. So here it's like my front is rising and my back is dropping down. And then when I pull the hands down, my front drops and disappears into my down chin, and my back becomes exposed and rises. But like we were doing with the fists, feeling how the extreme of one phase naturally pulls into the next phase. So we're just always wanting to join up the two aspects of the yin and yang. How does yang become yin? And how does yin become yang? So here I'm really compressing, so it just has to bounce out. And then here I'm really stretching, and it has to pull back down. And now just hands out. And now simply turning the head, but turn one hand over first. So you've got one hand up, one hand down. And then turn the head towards the hand that's looking up. And really glare at the hand with your eyes. And then turn the head the other way and twist the hands round. And the back hand, really try and twist it, the arm, so that the hand is trying to look up, but from underneath. And now really the same exercise, turning the head, but just coming from a very different place. So that one we've just done, I was really looking. Although even then, if you can get that machine that bounces between the two phases operating, then it will take you beyond the rational. The rational is very cool and withheld. It's like the rational observer that has to stand back, not to interfere too much. So it's separate. You've separated yourself from the observed. What we're trying to do all the time is just work in such a way that, in a sense, we become the only thing. We're the center. We're this heaving machine that's just pulling everything in. Turning the head. I'm not turning it this way because I'm wanting to look at there. I'm turning it there because I don't want to look at the front. I'm turning shyly to the side and really exposing this side of my head to the front, almost like there's eyes in the side or the back of my head, which are now looking front. And then I just bring my head back and then turn the other side. Trying to stimulate the eyes in the back of the head, and the way that we get the tentacles from the sacrum and the wings from the arms. Trying to stimulate the energetic aspect of the eyes. So my eyes have to avert in order to allow the back of my head to come round and get involved. And now just getting a figure of 8 going in the hand. Now the figure of 8 is on this sort of horizontal plane rather than like this, because I'm wanting to stretch it. So I twist this way to extend, and then I go over the top and just feel that action in the waist that's involved. So your waist is really having to twist against the hips because the hips can't move. And then just both together. Let's start with some breathing, but the same way we were sort of doing it when we were down there. This sort of tight motor. That's it. So it's really coming from the dantian region, almost like your diaphragm isn't really involved at all. It's all the belly sucking and pushing. And you'll find you will naturally reverse breathe. So here, as you pull the belly in, you'll naturally breathe in, and then here you'll naturally breathe out. So when the breathing intensifies, then it tends to switch into the reverse breathing. It's like the joy of physical work, of real physical work, something we just don't really experience anymore, because all our work is sedentary or low energy. Remember when we had that hurricane? Was it in 86? Remember when Seven Oaks became Five Oaks overnight? The garden of the apartment I was living in with Gillian, this big tree blew down in the garden. And so we had to somehow dispose of it. So Leon Bryce, who was a Tai Chi student, beautiful guy, he was just physically very strong. The only person I met who couldn't read. And he bought a two-man saw from his workshop where he worked. And me and him just sawed this tree into pieces. And it was so difficult, but the joy in just physically using your body well and interacting with another person. Because when you're using a two-man saw, you really have to listen to what the other person is doing. Otherwise, the saw buckles and you're liable to break it. That's what it should be like with the body. The two sides of the body are like the two men in the two-man saw. They're interacting joyfully, but really having to be attentive to each other. Now let's extend the posture just slightly. And now moving. But using the leg that's relatively empty, so the one that has less than 50% of the weight in it, to move ourselves. So now I've got a little bit more weight in this foot. So I use this foot to straighten and push myself completely into this foot. But really, I'm not really that interested in the weight. I'm more interested in just getting my body working like this heaving sexual machine. So as I push myself over here, I'm straightening the leg, I'm extending my toes so that they can spring back into a curl, into a hook. And I allow that to happen and that pulls me. And then this leg straightens and then that curls up. So I'm moving from the relatively empty leg. So this is straightening and then bending, straightening. Feel it in the toes, mainly in the toes. My toes are really stretching out the same as my fingers are. And then the toes start curling up like the fingers can into a claw. And that starts me moving into that leg. And then once I'm more than 50% across, this leg can kick in, straighten and claw. And it naturally produces a turn. So here, when I straighten the leg, it naturally pushes me round like this. So now I can't see my leg, it's invisible to me. And then it starts to claw and that pulls me round and now I can see it. And now this one. Stretch and contract, stretch and spring back. You're stretching elastic. I'm stretching this elastic leg and toes, and it will naturally spring back as soon as I relax that. all the while you have to remain really sinking. Because when I stretch this leg, I want to still keep a really strong connection with the ground. Otherwise, it's difficult to catch the ground on the return. Feel that in the arm, and then we want to try and mimic that with the leg. What I mean is, it's like yielding. So remember, when we yield, we first have to extend towards the person. And then my yielding is actually this. So that phase, the returning. So my hand is beginning to pull in like this. But as it does so, I want the feeling that my shoulder and my elbow are still going forwards. It'll tend to bring all of this up in order to come out and over the top. So I enter. Entering is like an attacking phase, so the elbow is dropped. The yield is really just bringing up the elbow. And then here I turn. I'm sort of turning in this direction to yield, the way, we'd normally yield like this. But I want this feeling that this has really come out. So it's almost like my neck shrinks down like this and my shoulders hunch. See, a lot of sort of Tai Chi masters look like that, almost like they've lost their neck. And hunch. I just want to feel that action in the shoulder, the upper arm, and the elbow. So even though I'm actually yielding the other person through, there's part of me that's still going around them like this. It's like they're sandwiched between my front, which is my hand and my forearm, and my back, which has got behind them. So yielding is not simply getting out of the way of the person. It's capturing them and changing them, particularly changing their direction. This is where you can really feel the separation between the waist and the hips. And then just do the same thing, but now getting the same action in the legs. So the way the shoulder sort of rolled up like this and the elbow came forwards, we just want to feel the same thing here. It's like my hip bone, which is the equivalent of my shoulder, has to somehow sort of release a little bit from the sacrum so that it can get this sense of doing this, coming up before it comes down into the leg. So I'm creating this space here as I come over the top, but similarly, I'm creating this space here as I come over the top with the hip. And now just feeling our posture. So we've spent years pulling our bum in, probably incorrectly, using too much force. And we've spent the last few weeks just allowing the tail just to release down and back. So now just tail released. Like my tail is unraveling and just dropping down, touching the ground. Like a kangaroo's tail. These have to break here. Let's just try squatting, just so you don't have to go down very far, but get a sense that your tail is trying to find the thing that you're squatting down onto. So you can imagine a chair behind you, and I'm probing for that chair. And then once I find it, then I can come back up. So something is almost erupting out of my skin and extending backwards. Feel the tail. You can't release it and let it have a life of its own unless you also release the thymus and let it have a life of its own. So as I extend my tail back, it's not doing this. It's not tending to, I'm not putting everything into it. I just want it to wake up so that it can do its thing. And then I'll find that, whoo, this is wanting to do its thing. And it's that that draws me up. It's my thymus reaching upwards that draws me up. It's my tail reaching back that draws me down. And it's the thymus that draws me up. And now let's just turn. And trying to get it turning from the hips now. Just working on keeping this whole hip, sacrum, groin area relaxed. The impetus for the turn, what is it that's making me turn? It's like a positivity. So I turn this side, and then it's as though someone over in the other side is calling my name. And I just come round with an open heart, willing to respond. And then the other side. So we'd like everything that we do to contain an aspect of spirit communication. So as I turn this side, if I'm using that same mechanism of the straightening and the bending leg, then turning this side actually opens up this side. My toes extend. So that's like reaching towards that person or that thing that is calling me. And then I just curl up in order to pull myself around to it. So it's the same really as what we were doing earlier on. We want to feel our invisible side, our back, reaching out into the world. It's not just my front that comes out. The front is always ego driven and will tend to ruin things, especially energy. I send something out and it coils around and pulls me back. So on one level, you're working really hard because you've got this sinking and the legs are having to really work to move you against that. Like you're in water. Imagine you're doing this in the pool, just how difficult it would be. But in another sense, you're like a perpetual motion machine. It's like everything is being called out of you, and so it's effortless. Physically, it's hard work, a lot of effort, but spiritually, it's no effort whatsoever. So the theme for today really is just that continuity, trying to join up the two phases. So the new phase grows inevitably from the old. As the old dissipates and completes itself, the new phase is already in evidence. And now let's just try a little bit with 1 foot forwards. But now just turning the waist, turning the hips really. Feel that your shoulders and your hips are completely in line and you're just turning. You can't really turn very much, so you sort of go from the corner, so in line with this foot, You don't want to go too far. I mean, it is possible for me to do this, but then it simply becomes riding horse to the corner. I'm sort of got this range, like a 90 degrees, this corner and this corner. So I turn to this corner and then back to the front, and then I turn to this corner. I'm trying to keep my spine in the middle, not really moving backwards and forwards, side to side too much. And I want it to come from the hips, from the turning of my hips, not the turning of my shoulders. My shoulders are just in line with the hips. The arms up makes it difficult to just feel the hips and just bring your hands down to the hips. We tend not to be aware of our hips. We're very aware of our arms and our shoulders because they do all the work for us most of the time. Our hips don't really do very much. So the work really is just developing the proprioception, refining our self-awareness. So at least we know what's happening. And just because we know what should be happening, it doesn't mean it will be. This is what one finds with practice. You think you've been doing what the teacher says, and you realize you've been doing something quite different. And to start with, we sort of lock this region into one thing and just turn it. But then you start to feel how you just have to just allow it to separate here. So you've very much got two sides of the hips operated by each leg. So this leg is having to push this hip backwards, and this leg has to push this hip forwards. And then I release that, and now this leg is pushing this hip round, and this leg is pushing this hip that way. So make sure when you turn to this corner, you have this foot, and make sure that when you turn to this corner, you have this foot. In a way, it's really just a place to move into if you needed to. And it just becomes that same exercise of moving the weight from side to side. This leg is extending, and then it contracts. This leg is extending, and then it contracts. The body is breathing. Every part of your body breathes. try and make sure that we get these two legs working so well together. It just produces this smooth turn in the hips that we know isn't really a smooth turn. We're having to work really hard and attentively to manage it. And now on this side, just try this exercise. Again, it just becomes the same thing. Feel ward off. Ward off is this. It's like I'm throwing a net over the other person. I've pushed and then I retrieve ward off. So there's this sense that my elbow has thrown this net over the other person. Which is exactly what we were doing earlier on. We were doing it a bit more dramatically and explicitly before. So when we yield, we really want the feeling that part of us is moving back with them, but another part of me is reaching behind them. This is Dr. Chi's big secret. Feel your tail, like a dragon's tail or a kangaroo's tail. It's quite thick where it joins the sacrum. Then it tapers down to a point or a fork. And then just feel the wings. So really the shoulder blades. Oh, you've got these two angels' wings that are quite big and heavy, and they trail all the way down to the ground. And just imagine that musculature that you'd require to get them to open out and lie. So what sort of intensification would have to happen inside to make these wings reach out in order to take off? Something inside would really have to pull together so that the wings could extend and expand. And then feel here as well that you've got two wings here. So the wings of the hips. And then here as well, like you have two like tentacles or wings coming out of the back of the head, either side of the occiput. They would be the wings of the eyes. So this is the sense of ward off of riding horse. Our wings are out, ready to extend and take off, or get involved with another person. And you can feel that when you're meditating as well. So when you're meditating, just hands on the dantian or like this or whatever. And just feel the wings. They've just wrapped around you. You're completely hidden by them. So meditation, for me, it's a bit like prayer, but prayer with your unconscious rather than your conscious. So if you verbally pray, then it's more like from your consciousness, from the front of your body, the hands are up, you're looking up to God. Whereas when it's your unconscious, when it's your back, all of this has disappeared and you've almost fallen into this blubbering huddle on the ground, but your back is just emanating. You're just playing between those two all the time. Remember that movie Into Great Silence, and the old monk, and he's sick, he's dying, so he's really sort of all huddled like this. And when I saw it, I just thought, when I saw the movie, I just thought to myself, how can he be doing good work? You need to keep a good spine. But of course, he'd just become all back. And so he was praying all the time, but not from his conscious mind. He was just bleeding in and out of God with his unconscious all the time. Now, I'm reading this Argentine psychoanalyst. I love psychoanalysis. I wish I could afford it. He just said, the unconscious is really just the past. It's just the weight of the past inside you, not just your own past, but the collective past the evolutionary past. And it's interesting, I read an article by this guy that's a very good translator of Sanskrit, of the Buddhist texts in Sanskrit and Pali. He knows all those languages. And he was saying that the word that we translate as mindfulness, which we tend to think of as being this real attention to the moment, to the here and now. He says, actually, in the original language, it had very strong connotations of memory and remembering. So being mindful is not simply being here now, it's dredging all of your past into the present, it's remembering. Okay, let's finish. So let's just bring it up. Just a little bit of this. Just to sort of loosen. So when the heel goes down, it just kisses the ground and then it comes back up again. So you don't really put the weight in the heel. And you're just wanting as much movement here as possible. That's still there. There's a poem by Charles Bernstein in which it starts off, poetry is like a swoon, only with this difference, it brings you to your senses. The rational, our normal mind that is constantly reinforcing the ego actually takes us out of our senses. We become insensitive. We may feel things, but it's generally like a sentimentality. And so when we work with these sort of heaving Paula machines, we're aware of what's happening, but it's not with our normal consciousness. We've sort of lost ourselves inside it. Almost like we've become possessed by a drive rather than this need for rational separation and rational clarity. So we want that there all the time in a very sort of low key. So it's like something in you is just pacing and twisting and figure-eighting, gyrating. Like I always think of Mac, the way he just couldn't stand still, just always twisting and turning. I mean, what sort of sensitivity? And a sight to behold is Mac pretending to be Mac. So when he knows what he's doing, and then when he really camps it up, you get seasick just watching him. So you're still, but not really still. Like the eye of the storm, or like the center of the whirling dervish.